Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51% a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, Republicans in the American state of Ohio are considering legislation that would ban abortion completely in the state and make the procedure punishable by life in prison or even the death penalty. By contrast, we're going to be taking a look at Ethiopia, which now has its first ever female president, with 50% of its ministers now being women. We'll be talking to human rights specialist Awol Allo from Awol University in the UK as to how impactful these appointments will be, and why Japan's falling birth rate is leading to a dramatic change in the country's navy, with women now being used to crew both warships and aircraft carriers. But first, and local lawmakers are considering a bill that would effectively ban abortions in the American state of Ohio. The proposed bill redefines the state's definition of person to include any unborn human. This would also mean that women who undergo terminations and the doctors who carry out the procedure could be charged with murder and potentially face the death penalty. Earlier this month, the state's House passed other legislation known as the Heartbeat Bill, which would ban all abortions as soon as a fetal heartbeat can be detected. In response, the state governor has vowed to veto that legislation, while pro-choice groups have declared the bill to be unconstitutional. Now, in the meantime, California is often considered as one of the most forward-thinking and liberal states in the US. But as this report shows, so-called pro-life medical centres have been popping up across the state, aiming to dissuade women from terminating a pregnancy.
Fighting for the unborn fetus's rights right outside an abortion clinic.
You will always miss the baby you never see.
California's anti-abortion movement is gaining influence. Officially, crisis pregnancy centres like this one give unbiased information and support. But in reality, volunteers are doing everything they can to dissuade women from turning to abortion, offering free ultrasound scans.
I've never had anyone that looked at their baby in an ultrasound and then said, well, I still want to go have an abortion. That's never happened.
The women are shown a video. When 19-year-old Brittany Silas watched it, she'd been planning to abort.
The baby is rapidly torn apart by the force of the suction and squeezed through this tubing down into the suction machine.
It shows you a little body, and then it shows how they pull out the leg, and then another leg, and then it's an arm. That video just showed me how I had a life in me, and I told her I don't want an abortion.
Until recently, these centres had to display a sign reminding visitors that abortion in California is legal and free. But this June, the Supreme Court ruled it no longer compulsory. Pro-choice activist Sarah describes a step back for women's rights.
When they see that sign, they can think to themselves, oh, okay, so I do have the right to access an abortion. This is a legal right. Or like, oh, I can get this paid for. Right? And so, because these crisis pregnancy centers aren't telling these young people what their rights are.
Wearing a hidden camera, Sarah's colleague visits one of the centers. Inside, their brochures claim abortion can lead to alcohol and drug abuse, and a video makes further assertions.
Interrupting a pregnancy before this point increases the risk of future breast cancer.
According to the World Health Organization, this is scientifically untrue. Several dozen crisis pregnancy centers have opened along the US West Coast, and with many of them located near high schools, pro-life activists are showing no sign of slowing down.
Now, Ethiopia has been in the news recently not because of war and drought, but thanks to extraordinary steps being taken to bring about gender parity. Its relatively new Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, recently filled half of his cabinet with women. Then the country's parliament appointed the nation's first ever female president, Saleh Work Zodeh. In addition, Birthrate Medessa, a former judge and leading opposition figure, has just been sworn in as the head of the nation's electoral board. Now, watching these developments closely is Awol Allo, a professor at Awol University in the UK and a specialist in both human rights and Ethiopia. He joins me now. Awol, thanks for your time. These are incredible decisions by the Prime Minister and the Parliament, especially given the traditional conservative nature of Ethiopian society. But do such steps go far enough?
Absolutely. I think it is important to kind of situate these remarkable steps that Ethiopia has recently taken in terms of gender equality within the broader package of reforms that are being pushed through by this new Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, in terms of opening up the political process and allowing for a diverse range of conversations to take place about the future of the country and the kind of nation the Ethiopian people want to have. And this particular measure in terms of gender equality is very much the highlight of a number of impressive reforms that the government has been taking.
Well, why is it happening now in relation to those steps being made towards gender parity?
Over the course of the last 27 years, there has been persistent demand for democratic opening, particularly over the course of the last 3 years since November of 2015. There has been relentless protest by people on the street demanding for change for the country going forward. But given the kind of patriarchal nature of the Ethiopian society, gender equality wasn't even part of public discourse. You know, whenever conversations about gender equality take place, it is very much on the margin of society, within the universities in the humanities department, but it has never been a serious political issue. And I think that is precisely why these developments, as you mentioned, are transformative measures precisely because of where we were as a country in the past.
Appointing women, however, to half of your cabinet is indeed a major move, but how soon is it going to impact legislation or government policy?
I think the role that these appointments would have is important in so many ways. It doesn't mean that it would certainly eclipse centuries of inequalities and all types of prejudices and stereotypes that exist towards women within society. But I think having the voice of women, the visibility of women in public spaces, particularly in those highly authoritative government positions, with all the powers that comes, with all the trappings of powers that comes with ministerial positions, I think for the Ethiopian public to be able to see those people taking those stages and speaking, addressing public policy, that would start the process of disrupting that stereotypical prejudicial attitude that deeply exists within society. And what it does is really begin to transform the mental terms of reference through which we look at the world, through which we kind of evaluate and judge questions of competence and who is able and who is not. So in terms of, I think, starting the process of rupturing that tradition and bringing about cultural and attitudinal change, I think it plays a very significant role. It's about allowing that women to take that public stage.
That's certainly the case, Awol, as we know here at the 51%, how important it is to have role models. But I want to ask you, just how tough is it going to be for these women to be a female politician in a country such as Ethiopia?
Well, I think the difference between these forms of authorities and other forms of authorities is the fact that this is sanctioned by the force of state. So people basically have no option really to abide by the decision they make. Now, this doesn't mean that there will not be a pushback from certain actors, colleagues, and the broader society. But I think this is a state power, and one of the distinctive features of state power is the fact that it is accompanied with some kind of sanction. So I think that is precisely why this is different, and that's why this would have such a transformative effect on young girls who are watching on television while these women are making this discussion, and it would makes it easier for them to say this is possible for me in a few years' time.
Awol Allo, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, Japan, as we've reported before, is a country with a rapidly ageing population. One direct result of that is that its navy has too few men to crew both its warships and aircraft carriers. So once again, demographics has become a deciding factor in getting the Japanese navy to transform itself into an equal employer, as Erin Agonki reports.
These Japanese women are on the front lines of several battlefields, but not only of the military sort. Women working on the Kaga, the country's largest warship and helicopter carrier, are hoping to win the battle for gender equality in the Japanese Navy. where men currently outnumber women by more than 10 to 1.
I think people's opinions change once they see women working here. Some people might think they'll only think about romance. But that's not what we're here for. We came because we also want to work and go out into the world.
Declining birth rates in Japan means there are no longer enough men to crew the country's warships. The problem is increasingly urgent as Japan looks to curb China's growing influence in the region. 9% of the 450 crew members serving on the Kaga are women, a proportion Tokyo hopes to extend to the entire military by the year 2030. Today, women make up just 6% of the Japanese military, compared to 10% in Great Britain and 15% in the United States. Women obtained the right to crew ships in Japan just 10 years ago. Some recruits say the rising number of women serving has already changed perspectives.
When I first joined 9 years ago, there were few women, and it felt like men didn't know how to deal with us. Now I think men see things more from our perspective.
The Maritime Self-Defense Force says the newer ships, like the Kaga, are built with certain safeguards to reassure female crew members. Men are banned from the women's sleeping quarters, and the newer generation of vessels are also equipped with more female toilets and bathrooms than the older models. Keeping with the pattern of change, the service says it may soon lift a ban on women serving aboard submarines. Such a move would eliminate the last major barrier facing female sailors in Japan.
And that's it for now. You can also connect with us via our Facebook page, that of course being France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. So until our next show, bye for now.